Have you ever wondered what's left of a man when he returns from war, without a part of himself, not just in body, but in soul? When I stepped back into my home, with the silence as my only witness, I realized something inside me had changed forever. I returned without a leg, but with something I'd never had before, a purpose. And no, it didn't happen overnight. It was a war within a war, and maybe that's why you clicked on this video. Maybe you too are struggling with something no one sees. The invisible scars are the hardest to explain. While the world sees what's missing from my body, few can see what bleeds silently inside. Have you ever felt that? Have you ever had to smile with eyes full of pain, just so no one would ask what happened? I know what it's like. After the battlefield is behind us, another battle begins. One without trenches, but with long nights, heavy memories, and a seemingly endless emptiness. The war took a lot from me. My mobility, my old self, the illusion of invincibility. But it also showed me truths I never would have seen otherwise. Believe me, pain has the power to reveal who you truly are. And what you'll discover now may surprise you, because sometimes it's by losing your footing that we learn to walk again, even with only one leg. For months I was asked how I kept going, but the right question isn't how, but why. What made me get out of bed after endless surgeries? What made me face the mirror, never taking my eyes off what I'd lost? That's where the journey that brought me here began. And it's that story I want to share with you today. It's not about heroism. It's about truth, about pain, about starting over, and about faith, even when everything inside you screams that it's over. If you've ever carried a trauma so heavy that it made you forget who you were, then you'll understand every word that follows. If you've ever felt afraid of no longer being whole, or of never being the same to those who love you, this video is for you. Stay with me until the end, because perhaps, in the midst of my story, you'll find answers to yours. I didn't come back the same, and that's the best and worst part of this story, because when everything falls apart, we have two choices: bury ourselves in the rubble, or rebuild something new from scratch with what's left. And that's exactly what I did. But before I tell you how this new purpose was born, and what really happened the day everything changed, you need to understand what came before, because nothing makes sense until you see it with your own eyes. The day war took part of my body but left room for something much greater. The day the war took part of my body, but left room for something much greater. And as I tell you this, maybe you're feeling something deep inside, a tightness in your chest, a memory that's resurfaced, a silence you know well. If this topic resonates with you, leave a comment below with what's touched you most so far. I read every message, and I assure you, it's not just important to me, it's important to everyone who stops by here looking for a little light in the darkness. Sometimes, what you share may be just what someone else needs to hear to keep going. And if this story has touched you in any way, if it sparked reflections or awakened something deep inside you, please leave a like. Not only because it helps the channel, but because it shows that this kind of conversation needs to continue. It's a sign that there are people out there wanting to hear truths like this, and live with more empathy, more awareness, more courage. And if you've made it this far and feel like this journey is similar to yours or that it can strengthen you in some way, subscribe to the channel. I create this content so we can journey together, to show that, even when hurt, it's possible to start over. And your presence here is what makes all this possible. With each new video, with each story told, our community grows, made up of those who have felt pain, but haven't given up on transforming that pain into purpose. Because there's still a lot you need to know about what came next, about the moment I almost gave up, and the detail that stopped me from doing so. The most intense part of this story is about to begin. I remember when it all began, not the day of the explosion, nor the hospital, nor the return. Before that, long before, I remember the sparkle in my eyes when I signed that paper. It was a mix of courage and illusion, as if donning the uniform would make me invincible, as if war were an honorable but controllable mission. I thought serving was wearing a uniform, maintaining posture, repeating commands. I thought I knew what pain was, what sacrifice was, but back then, the greatest pain I knew was missing someone. I was proud of myself for holding firm during training, for not complaining when my body ached. All of this seemed like proof of strength to me, until that day. The truth is, no one prepares you for what comes next. Movies show the heroism, the bravery, the gunfire, the action, but they don't show the smell of smoke lingering on your skin. They don't show the sound that echoes in your ears for days, even after the silence. And, most importantly, they don't show the empty look of someone who's seen more than they should. I went to war with a sense of duty and a naive faith that I'd return the same. I did return, but as a different person. Before the war, I was driven by goals. I wanted to honor my family, be respected, achieve something great. I believed discipline and determination would be enough to protect me from anything, and for a while, they were, until they weren't anymore. That day, the day that changed everything, reality presented itself unfiltered. And when I say it changed everything, I'm not just talking about the moment I lost my leg. I'm talking about the break, the invisible line between before and after. A before full of certainties, and an after full of questions no one could answer. The explosion was quick, but its aftermath still echoes. The physical impact was brutal, of course, but the real shattering was internal, because in that instant, I lost not only my limb, I lost a part of the identity I'd spent years building. The strength I thought I possessed crumbled from one second to the next. I found myself fragile, vulnerable, afraid to close my eyes at night, because closing my eyes took me back there. The transformation that followed wasn't pretty. There was no music to uplift me, nor divine light guiding me throughout. It was a slow, silent journey, full of falls. The decisions I had to make weren't about walking again. They were about accepting that I was no longer the guy who left full of dreams. And even more, they were about understanding that it's okay not to be. There's a hidden truth in all of this that few people have the courage to face. That you can survive on the outside and still be a wreck on the inside. I learned this behind the scenes of what they call recovery. While my body healed with stitches and physical therapy, my soul bled silently, without an instruction manual. And no one teaches you how to deal with this. No one tells you how to face the mirror when the reflection no longer matches who you thought you were. There was a time when just the thought of going outside would make my stomach churn. It wasn't shame about the prosthesis. It was fear of judgment, of curious gazes, of pity disguised as kindness. People don't know what to say, so they talk too much, or nothing at all. And every gesture, no matter how small, reminded me of what I'd lost, and how far I still had to go before I could find myself again. But amidst this darkness, a detail emerged that made everything begin to change. It wasn't a miracle, nor a great revelation. It was a simple gesture, from someone who saw something in me beyond the pain. And that's what I want to talk about now. Because even though the war ripped away part of my body, it was there, in that quietest hour, that a new meaning began to emerge. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject, because what came after that seemingly insignificant moment completely transformed the course of my journey, and may perhaps make you see yours in a different light too. Comment here. I'm on this journey too. I remember that day in vivid detail, not just the pain but the sound. A dull, muffled sound that came before the absolute silence. It's funny how time seems to stretch when everything collapses. It's as if the world slows down just so you can feel the impact in every cell of your body. The heat of the explosion, the smell of burning metal, the dust mixing with blood, and then the silence, a silence that screams. I don't know how long I lay there on the ground. I don't know if I screamed, maybe I did. Maybe I just thought about screaming. Everything became blurry. The pain was real, but there was something else, stronger, the awareness that something had been ripped from me, not just my leg, something deeper, something that wouldn't come back. It was at that moment that the word vulnerability ceased to be a concept and became a presence. The hidden truth about what it means to be human revealed itself in seconds. No matter how much you train, how much you endure physically, there comes a time when even the most prepared feel fear. Fear of not surviving, fear of surviving too long, fear of being forgotten right there in pieces meaningless. The ground beneath me was hard, but not as hard as what I was feeling inside. When they declared me rescued, everything hurt except the leg I'd lost. And that was the strangest part, because even without it, my body was still waiting for it. My brain was sending commands that had nowhere to go. I felt an itch in a place that no longer existed. I felt spasms in the void, but what throbbed most was the doubt. What now? Who am I without this? That explosion didn't just tear off a limb, it destabilized my identity. Everything I believed about myself shattered along with the ground that held me. In the following days, between surgeries and sedation, my body was patched together by expert hands. But my soul, no one touched that. And perhaps that was the greatest impact, because people saw what was missing, but not what was overflowing. Fear, anger, despair, denial. The feeling of being trapped in a body that no longer responded to its orders. I became a spectator of my own story, a man on pause, with the feeling that my story had been interrupted, and in a way, it had been. But amidst it all, something began to form. It wasn't strength nor hope, it was lucidity, a kind of clarity that only arises when everything superfluous is stripped away. Behind the scenes of pain, there are revelations that would never emerge in times of peace, and I began to see there in the hospital bed with tubes running in and out of my body that I was faced with a choice, not a simple choice, nor a glorious one, a silent, internal, difficult decision. Either I accepted that the explosion had buried me, or I would use the rubble to rebuild something. It was at this point that my mindset needed to shift, because it's not just about reacting to the pain, it's about talking to it, looking at the wound and asking, "What do you want to show me?" It's a strange but necessary dialogue, and the more I faced what I didn't want to feel, the more clarity I gained about what really mattered. And it wasn't about my leg, it was about who I would become without it. During the recovery process, doctors talked about physical progress, but there was another metric no one measured, the impact of absence. And I'm not talking about physical absence, but emotional absence, of feeling disconnected from oneself, a stranger in one's own body. The truth is that pain, when ignored, becomes a prison, but when acknowledged, it can become a bridge. And that's what began to happen, even though I didn't yet understand exactly where that bridge would lead me. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because there is a specific moment, brief, almost imperceptible, that changed everything. A moment that to outsiders might have had no meaning, but for me, that was when the true transformation began. Write in the comments. That makes sense to me. The hospital smelled lingering. It was a mixture of disinfectant, metal, and time standing still. Cold light streamed in through the high window, but it didn't warm anything. I lay there, surrounded by beeping machines, tubes entering my body, and a series of gazes that avoided looking at me for long stretches. At first, the focus was solely physical, healing the wound, managing the pain, adapting my body to what was left. But what no one saw was the other side of recovery, the one without a scalpel, prosthesis, or painkillers. It was the side where the soul had to relearn how to exist, even shattered. The worst pain was the one no one saw, the one that woke me in the middle of the night, even after days of exhaustion. The pain that didn't come from the cut, but from the absence of my old life, of the future I'd imagined, of the part of myself I didn't even know I valued so much, the idea of control. Because there, everything seemed beyond my reach. The hands that once held weapons now trembled to hold a spoon. The legs that once ran across open fields had become a memory. And my head, well, that was a storm no one heard. But it hit me hard, every day. I started counting the hours, not by the hands, but by my thoughts. Every time I woke up, something inside me wondered if it was worth continuing. I didn't say it out loud, of course, because no one wants to be the soldier who gave up. The image they expect of you is one of strength, of bravery, but no one teaches you how to deal with emptiness, with that inner space that opens up when the outside world no longer makes sense. And that's where emotional recovery shows how much more difficult it can be than any physical rehabilitation. The prosthesis was a victory, they said, a breakthrough, a symbol of overcoming. But what they didn't see was how much that metal, however technologically advanced, didn't fill what had been ripped out inside. I put on the prosthesis, put on the clothes, smiled when they said, "You're an inspiration." But inside, I could barely breathe, because it all felt like a performance to show I was doing well, when in reality, I was just trying to survive the new reality, unsure if I would ever recognize myself in that body again. It was during this period that I began to understand the true meaning of the word reconstruction. It wasn't about returning to who I was, but about learning to be someone new, with everything I had left. A forced but inevitable transformation. And this process requires something no one gives you in the hospital: time and permission. Time to feel, permission to hurt. Because there's a hidden truth in this kind of journey, that you need to accept the brokenness before you can desire healing. Little by little, I began to allow myself to feel, to stop running from the mirror, to look at my scar and see not a defeat but a reminder that I was still there. and that in itself was already an achievement. The emotional impact of losing a body part isn't just the physical absence but what it represents: the shattering of an identity, the loss of references, the fear of never belonging again. There, behind the scenes of recovery, I began to realize that my war wasn't over. It had simply changed scenery. Now the battlefield was within me. Every morning was a choice, to get up or not, to face the pain or pretend it didn't exist. And this decision, silently repeated every day, was what began to redefine my story. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject, because there is a point in the journey where you stop searching for what you lost and start discovering what can be born from what is left. Comment here. That makes sense to me. If someone had asked me in those hospital days where it hurt most, I would have answered without hesitation. In my mind, that was where the war continued to rage. Only now, without uniforms, without real explosions, without voice commands, the enemy now lived within, and it was silent, stealthy, insistent. Sometimes it came in the night, disguised as a dream. Other times, it infiltrated in broad daylight, in the middle of a sentence or an innocent thought. All it took was a smell, a louder sound, a uttered word, and I was pulled back to where I was no longer, but where a part of me had never left. The nightmares were all too real. I'd wake up sweating, gasping for breath, feeling like I was still under fire. And even after I opened my eyes, my body remained on alert. My heart raced, my muscles stiff, my mind confused, trying to understand where I was. It took minutes, sometimes an eternity, to realize I was safe. But what is safety when danger lurks inside your own head? That was the question I couldn't stop asking. Loneliness was also loud. Even with people around, I felt isolated, not for lack of love, but for lack of language. How to explain what happens inside an emotional minefield? How to describe in simple words a feeling that changes shape every day? I tried. I tried to smile. I tried to appear strong. I tried to show that I was moving forward. But each attempt took me further from the truth. And the truth was I was tired. Tired of pretending, tired of fighting something no one could see. At times I considered giving up, not because I wanted to end my life, but because I no longer saw the point in continuing that way. Living with an incomplete body was difficult enough, but living with a fractured mind, with thoughts that wouldn't shut up, with memories that surfaced without warning, that was even more exhausting. It's strange to admit, but I even envied the physical pain, because it was visible. It received attention, care, medication. The other pain, that of the soul, was treated with silence, or with phrases like, "It will pass," and "You are strong." That's when I began to understand a hidden truth. The real battlefield begins when the shooting stops, when you return home and realize that what physically wounded you wasn't the end, it was the beginning. Psychological trauma doesn't respect a schedule. It doesn't show up on time, doesn't ask for permission, doesn't introduce itself politely. It simply enters, settles in, and begins to control everything from the inside out. And the hardest part? It doesn't always come with clear signs. Sometimes it disguises itself as fatigue, other times as apathy, but almost always it's accompanied by the feeling that no one would understand, even if you tried to explain. And it was at this point in my journey that I had to make an internal choice. Either I continued trying to control something that was clearly beyond my reach, or I accepted that I needed help. Not just professional help, but spiritual, emotional, and relational help. I needed to be seen in my entirety, not just as the soldier who lost his leg, but as the man who was trying to find meaning amidst the invisible rubble. Therapy sessions began as an obligation. At first, I'd enter silently and leave quietly, suspicious, thinking it was just another protocol. But little by little, something began to open up, not all at once, but in small bursts, in small revelations. And it was in these conversations, many of them difficult, others silent, that I began to understand that courage also means admitting that you're not okay, that strength sometimes lies in sitting down and crying, and that the true healing process doesn't begin in the body, it begins in the truth. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject, because there is a very specific moment when, even without having found all the answers, I stopped running away from the questions. Comment here. I'm on this journey too. I don't know exactly what made me stop in that hallway that day. Maybe it was exhaustion from yet another physical therapy session. Maybe the persistent pain that seemed to mock the painkillers. Maybe just the need to breathe in silence, away from everything. But it was at that moment, leaning against the cold hospital wall, that something different happened. A woman passed me pushing a wheelchair in which sat a young man, much younger than me, missing both arms. He looked at me, not with pity, nor with astonishment. He looked at me with something I still can't accurately describe. It was as if he were saying, without saying anything, "I know." And that silent "I know" was more profound than any word spoken until then. In that moment I understood that pain connects us more than victory, that there's something mysteriously powerful in knowing you're not the only one trying to pick up the pieces. And maybe that's why, after that look, I couldn't hide anymore. I went back to my room and cried like I hadn't cried in months. Not out of anger, but out of liberation. It was as if, finally, I'd laid down my weapons against myself, as if I recognized I didn't need to be indestructible to carry on. And it was there, in the midst of the pain, that I discovered my new purpose. Life led me to that hospital like a wounded soldier, but in that silent cry, I began to see myself as something different, someone who could transform what I experienced into a bridge to others. I realized that every scar, physical or emotional, could be more than a mark of war. It could be a sign of passage, a trail left for those still in the dark. And that's how the idea was born. Not a lecture, nor a success, nor a status quo. It was a simple idea: to listen, to welcome, to be there, to be present, because in the end, that's what heals. Knowing someone is still there, even when the world has turned its back. The following days were different. There was still pain, still relapses, still doubts. Many. But I started paying attention, noticing other looks like that. I started talking, sometimes saying very little, sometimes just listening. What surprised me was that even without knowing exactly what to say, my story began to resonate. Not because it was tragic, but because it was real. Because it spoke of something many people experience but few have the courage to tell. The truth hidden behind silence. The behind-the-scenes pain the world doesn't want to see. This new mindset took shape slowly, like a minefield I had to navigate carefully. Each conversation revealed something new. Each step into my own vulnerability brought me closer to something greater. And when I least expected it, it wasn't just about me anymore. It was about us. About all those who carry internal battles and are ashamed to show them. About those who think feeling too much is weakness. About those who believe they no longer deserve new beginnings. And it was in this place, in this space between wound and hope, that I began to find myself again. The real transformation wasn't in my leg. It was in the way I began to see what I'd previously tried to ignore. Life with pain isn't the end. It's an invitation. It's the territory where you can make new decisions, not because everything has gotten easier, but because you're now aware of what truly matters. And with this awareness comes a strength that doesn't scream, but sustains. A strength that arises not from what's missing, but from what resists. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject, because there was a second moment as subtle as the first, that confirmed what that look in the hallway had begun, that even the most cruel pain can be used as a seed for something greater than we can imagine. Comment here. That makes sense to me. After that encounter in the hallway, something inside me shifted. It wasn't sudden, nor dramatic, but it was definitive. It felt like a new road was beginning to take shape right beneath my feet, and for the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid to walk it, even if it staggered. I was still the same war-scarred man, still missing my leg every time I stood up, still carrying shadows within me, but there was something different, a calling, not a mystical call, nor a voice from heaven. It was an inner, silent, and profound impulse to make something of everything that had torn me apart. That's how I began speaking, first in small groups. I shared my story with other soldiers who were also recovering. Many were still in wheelchairs, others with their eyes downcast, unsure of their future. And there, in that environment filled with suppressed pain, my voice trembled. But it reached, not because I was saying pretty words, but because I was telling the truth. And the truth, when spoken by someone who has bled, has an impact no theory can produce. I realized my mission wasn't to teach. It was to remind each of them and myself that suffering doesn't have to be an end, that there is life after trauma, that it's still possible to transform scars into testimony, and that even if we've lost parts of our body or soul, there's still meaning in continuing. That's what kept me going. The silent impact my words had when someone at the end of the meeting said to me, "I've never talked about this before, This new mission grew with me. It wasn't a project drawn on a whiteboard. It was a construction made from fragments of conversations, glances, tears, and silences. I began to be invited to support groups, then to larger events. And the more I spoke, the more I understood that my story wasn't unique, it was only told aloud. The hidden truth is that thousands of soldiers return from war every year and never get to tell what they truly experienced. They swallow their pain, disguise their triggers, bury their ghosts. I was just one among many, but now I could be a voice, and not just for veterans. Little by little, people who had never picked up a gun began to identify with my story, because deep down, we all face wars. Some external, some internal. The journey of overcoming doesn't require a uniform, it requires courage. And that's when I understood. My mission was greater than I imagined. To heal beyond soothing wounds. To touch where words don't easily reach. To be a mirror and a bridge. To show through my own vulnerability that no one needs to go it alone. This new mindset changed everything. Decisions that once seemed burdensome now had direction. Every encounter, every conversation, every tight hug after a talk became part of something bigger. It wasn't about fame nor recognition. It was about meaning, a meaning built on pain, but also on choice, because that's what transforms. The choice not to waste pain, to use it as a tool, a beacon, an instrument of collective healing. And in this process, I discovered an even deeper truth. There is emotional authority in those who have lived what they say. You don't have to be perfect, nor have all the answers. You just have to be willing to look into the eyes of someone who's at rock bottom and say, I've been there too, and I'm here now. This doesn't just create connection, it creates trust. It creates possibility. Now I want to delve even deeper into this topic, because there came a time when I had to confront something even more challenging than pain. Forgiveness. Not what they ask of you, but what you need to offer, even when you think you can't. Comment here. I'm on this journey too. The first time I walked with the prosthesis, it wasn't anything like what I'd imagined. I thought it would be a moment of glory, like a movie scene, slow motion, music in the background, everyone applauding. But it was much quieter and in a way more real. It was a simple empty hallway with that floor that echoed with footsteps. A physical therapist at my side, eyes attentive, and there I was, taking the first step. A little crooked, unbalanced, unsure, but it was a step. And in that instant something ignited inside me. It wasn't pride, nor euphoria. It was a kind of raw, almost crude gratitude. I was alive, and I was going. The new routine was full of challenges. Simple things like climbing stairs, getting into a car, taking a shower without fear of slipping, all required attention that was previously automatic. At first everything was slow, tiring, irritating. I missed the fluidity of before, the autonomy, the freedom to simply get up and go. And there were days when this consumed me. The mental fatigue was worse than the physical. But over time, I learned to recognize small victories, staying on my feet longer, learning to get up after a fall, being able to run, yes run, even if I felt like a robot out of rhythm. Each achievement was a reminder that despite the loss, I could still evolve. And it was during this routine of relearning that I realized something that completely changed the way I viewed my condition. What I had long treated as a disability actually offered me a new perspective, not only on the world, but on myself, because it was only after the loss that I truly began to listen to my body, my mind, my limits. It was only after that I stopped functioning on autopilot and began living with intention, with presence, with attention to the present. The transformation happened slowly, in the details. A conversation with someone in line at the pharmacy who recognized my story. A boy who looked at my prosthetic leg and said, "Wow, you're like a superhero." A lady who grabbed my arm at the grocery store and thanked me for coming back. These small interactions had a huge impact, because they reminded me of something I already knew deep down. The world still saw me, and more importantly, I could also see myself again. And the reflection I saw now wasn't that of a broken man. It was that of a man being rebuilt. There's a hidden truth in this kind of journey. We only discover what we truly carry when everything that was excess is stripped away. I lost a leg, but I gained awareness. I gained purpose. I gained sensitivity. I began to pay attention to things that previously went unnoticed. The color of the sky in the late afternoon, the sound of water running from the shower, the pleasure of placing both feet, one made of flesh, one made of metal, on the ground, and knowing that even so I could still walk. The pain didn't go away, but it ceased to be the center. My mindset has changed. Today I no longer see myself as incomplete. Because if there's one thing this process has taught me, it's that completeness isn't found in the symmetry of the body, but in the wholeness of the heart. I once felt like a burden. Today, I recognize myself as a bridge. I once felt diminished. Today, I see myself expanded. I once believed I had lost everything, but now I know that what I thought was loss was actually an opening, a gap through which light entered, a crack that revealed strength, an absence that taught me presence. Now I want to go even deeper into this topic, because there is a very specific moment when this new vision of myself was put to the test, and what happened there still resonates with my journey to this day. Comment here. That makes sense to me. You don't have to have been to war to be at war. I know what that's like, and there is a way out. Pain doesn't choose a uniform, a position, or an address. It just arrives, sometimes with a warning, other times with a shock. And when it arrives, it dismantles everything that seemed solid. It shatters certainties, blurs the senses, erases the vision of the future. I've been there, the place where silence weighs more than noise, where getting out of bed seems impossible, where you look in the mirror and no longer recognize yourself. And if you feel this way today, if the pain you carry has made you forget who you were, or convinced you there's no way out, then listen to this carefully. It's not the end. There's a kind of suffering no one sees, an emotional exhaustion that slowly builds and occupies every corner of your soul. It's when you keep doing what needs to be done, but inside you've already given up. You go to work, talk to people, put on a smile, but there's a part of you that's no longer there. And you wonder, does anyone notice? Sometimes they do, but they don't know how to approach. Other times they don't notice at all, because you've learned to hide, to camouflage, to survive in silence. And that's exactly why this conversation is so necessary, because there are people who look at me today and say, "You won, you overcame it," and I understand what they mean. But what few know is that winning doesn't mean never feeling pain again. It means not letting pain dictate the rules. Overcoming isn't about erasing what happened, it's about integrating it. It's about looking at the wound and saying, "You're part of my story, but you don't define my destiny." And that's a choice. Not an easy one, but possible. The hidden truth no one likes to admit is that many of those who appear strong are just surviving. And there's no shame in that. The shame is pretending everything is fine when deep down, you just want to be heard. I learned the hard way that asking for help isn't weakness. It's maturity. It's emotional intelligence. It's the first step out of hiding where trauma grows silently. Transformation begins at that point. The moment you allow yourself to be true to how you feel. And you might ask me, but how? How do we keep going when everything seems meaningless? The answer isn't a formula. It's a journey. And it begins with a very small but very powerful decision. Not to give up today. That's all. You don't have to solve everything now. You just have to not give up today. And if tomorrow is difficult again, repeat, "I will not give up today." That's how we get through the darkness. One step at a time, even if we stumble, even if we cry. The pain I experienced taught me things no course, no book, no training could teach me. It taught me to listen more than I speak, to see beyond appearances, to value the simple, to love more truly, and above all to understand that those who suffer in silence don't need ready-made answers. They need company, presence, someone who says, "I'm here, I know, and you are not alone." The impact of a single true word can be greater than 1,000 pieces of technical advice. Sometimes all we need is a spark, something that ignites a memory that, yes, there were good days, and that they can return, that what you feel now is not your sentence, it's a season, and no season lasts forever. Pain, when respected, can become a teacher, but to do so, you need to stop being held hostage by what hurts you and start being the protagonist of your own reconstruction. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject, because there is a simple, almost forgotten gesture that was able to reconnect me with everything I thought I had lost, and it can do the same for you. Comment here. That makes sense to me. Even though I came back with one less leg, today I have one more reason to keep going. This may sound simple, but it carries a weight that only those who have walked through darkness understand. Because what moves me now is not the absence of pain, but the presence of purpose. I no longer wake up hoping life will go back to the way it was before, because I've already understood that the past won't come back. And that's okay. What comes next may even be deeper, more truthful, more aligned with what truly matters. This ongoing mission isn't made of grand acts, nor epic moments. It's made of small encounters, honest words, respected silences. It's the kind of mission that happens when you choose to look someone in the eye and say, I know how it hurts, but there's a way out. It's this real, imperfect, yet available presence that makes a difference in the world of those who are on the verge of giving up. And maybe, just maybe, that's what truly heals us. The chance to be a shelter while we're still rebuilding ourselves from within. Throughout this journey, I've come to realize that each person carries battles that others don't see. That quiet colleague, that always smiling neighbor, that young man who doesn't look up. Everyone has stories. And when we allow ourselves to share our pain authentically, without shame, without makeup, without disguise, we open space for others to free themselves too. Pain ceases to be a burden only yours and becomes a bridge that connects stories, hearts, and paths. There's a strength that's born when we decide to live with intention, not to live for the sake of living nor to follow inertia, but to walk knowing why we're walking. And this mindset changes everything, because even on days when sadness persists, even when your body doesn't respond as it once did, even when memories weigh you down, you know what you're doing here. You know there's something greater guiding your steps. And that's more powerful than any limitation. This truth reconnected me with myself, with what I believe, with what I want to leave in the world. I understood that my voice has value, not because I have all the answers, but because I survived the hardest questions. And I'm still here, walking, one step at a time, falling, getting up, starting over. And if you've come this far with me, perhaps you're on this journey too. The journey of transforming wounds into sources, absence into presence, loss into meaning. And look, there's nothing more beautiful than seeing this transformation unfold, not just in me, but in so many people who have begun to allow themselves to feel, to heal, to make room for something new. Because yes, it is possible to start over even amidst the shattered pieces. It is possible to rediscover beauty, even after chaos. And it is possible to live with your whole heart, even if your body is left scarred. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject, because there is a revelation that only reached me when I finally stopped fighting the pain and began to listen to it like someone listening to an old friend. Comment here. That makes sense to me. If you've made it this far, it's because this story spoke to some part of you. And truly, that means a lot to me. Maybe you're also going through a process of rebuilding. Maybe you know someone who is. Or maybe you just wanted to understand a little more about what happens to those who return from war, from the inside. Whatever the reason, thank you for walking with me this far. If this message touched you in any way, if it resonated, if it sparked reflection, subscribe to the channel. Here, each video is designed with this in mind, to generate connection, open space for real conversations, and create a safe space for those going through difficult times. Your presence here is what keeps all this going. And leave a simple sentence in the comments, but one that captures everything we experienced together in this video. I'm with you until the end. That way I'll know you've stuck it out this far. And I promise you, that makes me stronger than you can imagine. Oh, and if this video brought you any clarity or relief, click the like button. Not because I asked you to, but because it shows that this type of content is worth keeping, that this exchange has value. There's a video here that goes into more detail on this topic. Click through and follow along with me there. The journey isn't over yet.